You want to find someone that loves you in spite of everything that you think is flawed about you. That starts with, obviously, with you having some sense of, I'm okay the way I am is, and imagine then encountering someone that is even like, yeah, I don't care if you're avoidant sometimes, or I don't care if you're like anxiously attached. I just love you the way you are. There's nothing, literally nothing you need to change about yourself. Just the way you are, you're okay. And that's to me the most sacred and healing experience because it heals the core wounds that almost every person has.
You know, it's interesting because I also know, like, okay, yes, I work with anger and I'm working with boundaries. And sometimes I think me being so happily, readily able to block also triggers people when I tell them because they're like, oh my God, I could never do that. Like the people pleasing and other people gets triggered. So sometimes I'm
Yes.
also like, are you really judging that I've done it? Like, of course, I try to be more understanding. Like I've had times in the past where there's a good phrase that someone says like boundaries are not the wall, it's just showing you where the door is. Also, as a woman, do emotional labor to educate a man maybe about why he's XYZ, like stepping over boundaries. Sometimes I'm like, you know, I don't have the energy.
Welcome to the Spiritual Bypassers podcast. This week, we're talking about Ashley's dating life. We're actually not only talking about it, we're dissecting it. We're opening up Ashley's shadow and we're taking a deep look inside. And we found some nasty things in there. I can tell you that. Ugh, I'm still shivering. Jesus Christ. We talked about her blocking habits. We talked about ghosting. We talked about the masculine and feminine polarities, and we had loads of fun actually. And we wrapped up this episode thinking like, fuck, we want to talk for so much longer. So without further ado, enjoy the episode and helping you, Jannick, Tim, and Ashley.
So, welcome back, everybody. And finally, I am back on full health, so I could finally prepare some
Woo!
content for us today. So, yeah, there was like a little teaser last week of maybe Ashley dropping in some content about her dating life. I'm not sure. Maybe you guys are going to get some juicy nuggets. There's going to be a quiz at the end also about this, so prepare for the winners. But yeah, I wanted to bring in first a topic that kind of links to dating, but it also links to trauma response and emotional sensitivity, like the topic around blocking people. Because
Mm.
it's a joke also amongst my friends. I'm very trigger happy with the block button. I'm like, I don't always need to have the conversation of like, I'm going to block you now. It's just like I close the door sometimes. So I'm curious to hear from you guys a bit about when is it healthy boundaries and when is it a flight trauma response that comes from blocking? Because I know for a fact, whether it's with myself or just if you think about it in general, in particular with the topic around dating, for me as a woman, at times if there's a boundary is crossed, if it's being like harassed or you're being unfairly projected on, if someone is being rude, like for me, I have no problem with just hitting block on WhatsApp or on Instagram. And that triggers then people sometimes because they're like, yeah, you didn't leave the door open for discussion. I'm like, I don't have to do that. Like if you're crossing and being rude, etc., etc. But I also am aware, and I've done reflecting on this, that there is definitely an aspect that's stopping me in that way to look into maybe emotions of shame or hurt, keeps me in a loop of like not like an echo chamber where like if you just block, you don't have to deal with those feelings. So it's like I'm curious to hear also from your perspective because you're guys also like how that can differ in terms of healthy boundaries and not so healthy.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's so interesting that you bring that up because just yesterday I had a conversation about that with a friend of mine, and
Perfect.
she was reflecting on that as well. Like, am I blocking too quickly or too fast, and am I avoiding something? And as always, probably like the truth lays in both of the sides, right? There's truth to both of them. So I feel like yes, what you just shared resonated a lot with like, oh, just gonna avoid some of the icky feelings of shame and of needing to look at like taking responsibility, right? And looking at my own topics. And at the same time, there is there are healthy boundaries that at some point, sometimes it's the best thing to just block them. And for me, I feel like checking in with myself is always a good idea and seeing from like which energy in my body is this coming? Is it like a fear Is it like, oh shit, like maybe they're gonna text me and that's gonna be like so scary, I don't want to read this, I'm just gonna block them? That's like one aspect of it. And then is it also something about power, right? Because when you block them, maybe you feel like powerful and you're like, yeah, I showed them, I maybe I even hurt them, they deserve to be hurt by me, like because now I'm in charge. I'm in charge of the closeness or the distance between us when I do that. So I take control. And when you take control, that feels good. And you know you might be able to hurt them, and that can feel good to a part of you as well. Because maybe they hurt you, so you want to hurt them back. Very natural human thing, but of course it needs some reflection. And yeah, the last aspect then would be the okay, like the things he's texting me, that's just like too much. That's just like I'm not gonna deal with that. That's he's crossing boundaries. Okay, stop. But even in that case, you can always communicate. You can be like, hey, this is too much. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Everything that I wanted to say has been said. I'm gonna block you. So there's almost never a reason not to communicate that aspect that you're going to do that. Because if you do that, that's a sign that maybe you just want to take control and like feel good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Resonates. But I just the power aspect. I remember even one time having like slightly this kind of argument over a message, and as someone was typing a reply,
Yeah.
it was like, of course, like this power trip. Yeah, but this is also the thing. I mean, having like from the dating side of thing, of course, there's more emotions involved. But I mean, also like having more and more followers on Instagram, you also have people who are like coming at you with like rudeness or projections. Like when I went viral, my block list was huge because I was like, I don't need to tolerate this. This is my space. Like if you can't be polite, then I'm just gonna block you, which is more of a separate topic. But yeah, Tim, I'm curious. I also want to hear if like you guys have ever blocked. I'm curious about this, but Tim, go on.
I would say that one hallmark or one way to know if you are behaving in a shadowy way, like if your shadow is taking over, is the degree of impulsiveness that you're acting with. So if you're just like, oh, and blocked, and you're not, it's almost like a ghost was entering your body and he was saying, okay, block. And there was no, okay, I'm sitting here just like Jannick said, like feeling into it and seeing what the emotion, like how you feel and if it's reasonable to block. It can be very impulsive, and in that impulsiveness, there can be like an avoidance of a deeper pattern. I would say in any case you're avoiding something, but the avoidance is not a problem, it's more a solution. Like you want to avoid harmful comments because they're not good for you. So the question is also, what are you blocking off? Is it, oh, this person is making me feel slightly uncomfortable and oh, that's a cringe involved and I'm just pushing him or her away in that moment? Or is it, okay, I feel insulted and I feel shamed and this is not healthy and I don't want to have this in my field whatsoever, and that's why I'm consciously pushing that person away. And even I can tell in the way we talk about it, that's my third point, is it's kind of a running gag, and there's like I blocked someone again, yay, there's this not seriousness about it, and that that's I think that's what's playing a role. It's almost like, yeah, maybe this power play or this, then people laugh about you blocking someone and saying like, oh, actually, yeah, you really showed him something like that. So I think the yeah, the fun in it and the joy of hitting the block button could also play a role, but obviously these are just assumptions and reflections. And yeah, and also I think power can be super important when it comes to blocking, because if someone is insulting you and invading your personal space, there can be a feeling of helplessness, and the power you gain from blocking that person can be super important. So
yeah,
yes, it is a power play and it is avoidance, but that doesn't have to be bad. It can be a solution, actually.
yeah, it's almost like this instant gratification of like, that's not in it's that channel is blocked. Like there's no way that that person can reach. You know, it's interesting because I also know like, okay, yes, I work with anger and I'm working with boundaries. And sometimes I think me being so happily, readily able to block also triggers people when I tell them, because they're like, oh my God, I could never do that. Like the people pleasing and other people gets triggered. So sometimes I'm
Yes.
also like, are you really judging that I've done it? Like, of course, I try to be more understanding that. Like I've had times in the past where there's a good phrase that someone says, like, boundaries are not the wall, it's just showing you where the door is. And of course, then by saying I'm blocking you now is showing where the door is for now, instead of just cutting the communication. But indeed, like I also know a lot of people like, oh my God, I could never do that. And I'm like, yeah, well, life's too short. Like, why would you want to sit and discuss this with somebody? Why do you need to also, as a woman, do emotional labor to educate a man maybe about why he's XYZ, like stepping over boundaries? Sometimes I'm like, you know, I don't have the energy. Like, I'll invoice me. Like, I'm not here to be your coach to like teach you how to be a decent human being. Your parents should have done that. Why do I have to then do that? I'm like, I don't need to do this. Go away.
Yes.
I
Yes.
would, so the thing is, if you block someone instantly without showing them the door, then the door is closed from the beginning on. And that's
Yeah.
that can be very, because it's like a severe boundary cross, and you're just like, no, you're not, I'm not even, it's not a topic of discussion, and the door can just be closed. But if a boundary shows where the door is, then the door needs to be shown, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's a lesson that I also got in the last. Like one time I blocked someone on WhatsApp and they messaged me on Instagram like, haha, you forgot to block me on here as well. It's like, thank you for the reminder.
Yeah, the way you
Yeah,
talk
that's what I
about it
mean.
and the way
There's
you
like
laugh.
there's a joke, there's the jokiness around
There's the
it.
joke. Yeah. It's fun, but it can be a sign that it's about something else than just healthy boundaries. And I
Yeah.
loved what you just said, Ashley. I always tell people, look at where you are on the spectrum. Where are you on the spectrum? Are you a person
On the
who
autism spectrum.
on the spectrum of, are you drawing boundaries very early and like maybe too early, and you're very easily triggered, or you're very easily just doing that because out of an impulse, like Tim said? Or are you a person that never draws the boundaries and is always like like almost staying too long in the connection, even though you're already suffering and you're still doing it, and still somehow maybe I can change them or whatever? And like in my experience, a lot of people, especially in the spiritual realm, in the healing space, they are not so good at drawing boundaries. That's why Ashley's work is so important, because the anger work is exactly what these people need, and the boundary work. And if you see yourself on the spectrum more on that side, maybe it's a sign that when you feel like you want to block someone, that it already takes a lot that you will feel that, because you are someone who always wants to save it and who wants to live in harmony. So then that might be a sign. Yes, it might be time to tell them, hey, it's too much. I'm going to block you. And to answer your other question, I can't remember that I've blocked someone, but what I've done a lot is mute people, so I don't have to see them or archive the messages or whatever. So even if they text me, I won't like be able to read it, or I won't read it. And that's been healthy for me and helping me a lot, because that way, not every time I open Instagram or I open my WhatsApp, I see the messages, I see what the person does. I just want to like have some business, because 100 years ago, we didn't, when we broke up with someone, we didn't see anything about their life, or like, and it feels like that's so artificial. It's so weird. Like you're not in my life anymore. Why do I see what the drinks that you're drinking, or the beaches that you go to? Like that just brings up so much stuff, and every time you have to process again and again and again, and it becomes this habit. And the mind always thinks everything that's there is important in your life. So when you throw something out and you focus on something else, that can really help you to focus on the right things, and not have somebody else influence what is important in your life, which is the social media app or whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a slight caveat I want to bring in, because that example of the Instagram person, I had actually had a conversation, because I want to talk about ghosting as well, because ghosting is also very big in the dating world. And this person I had one date with, and afterwards went on a trip. And I already started feeling like, oh, this isn't something I want to pursue. So instead of just ghosting, I took a phone call with them on video call and said like, hey, like, I really appreciate you, all of these things. I know I could have just done this on text, but I wanted to give you the benefit of a phone call, that I don't feel this connection, and like explained that and things. And on the phone call, it was fine. and then half an hour later I get like a huge aggressive message of like, you're really bad at communicating before and this, and you've led me on, and that, like, all things that were not making sense. And I was like, that's not what's happened here. Like, I could have actually ghosted you. What, like, how the audacity to like come at me when I was trying to do someone a favor. So that's also my question of like, maybe we can talk about ghosting a bit. Have you guys ever ghosted? And yeah, your opinions on it, because I know this is also like a huge topic where people just go complete avoidance, and I know you both have avoidant tendencies, so I'm curious.
Hey. Yes, I do.
Outed.
Yes. I wasn't ready for this outing.
Can you define
Across the
can you
boundary.
define ghosting? Is it not replying to messages, period, or is it just in the
It
dating
means
world? Or...
completely disappearing off the face of the earth. So whether that is blocking or whether that is just never replying to a message again, yeah, just like completely cutting contact. And I know people who've like been dating someone for 6 months, and suddenly from one day to another, the person like cuts. That's maybe a little bit more sadistic because that's so deep into a connection. But let's say like when people are dating in the first month or so, and you could feel like you had maybe one date, maybe two, and it was really nice, and you think things are going well and you're talking a lot, and then like suddenly nothing. Like I personally haven't had it happen in that way. I had like one date, I remember, where then I just never heard from them. They never replied after. So I find like when I hear about this, I get that it's people maybe don't have the skill sets to communicate what they're feeling. We are not taught how to do nonviolent communication. So like if you're not feeling someone, people find it easier to just not say anything as opposed to be like, hey, I'm just not that into you. But actually all it takes is one text message just to be like,
exactly.
I had fun. And there's kind of caveats into the nice guy episode we did on the first ever episode, because then sometimes you can say I'm not interested, and then you trigger the nice guy aspect as well, which is what happened in the guy I had to block. So,
yeah, true. Yeah,
full circle.
It's full circle. This wasn't planned. I've been on both sides of this, and yeah, it felt awful when someone like ghosted me, and I texted them and I was like, yo, this is not okay. If you didn't feel it, just like let me know. And it's disrespectful not to say anything. I just let them know, but they still kept ghosting me. So, but that was a young girl, and it was like, I don't know, 8 years ago or 7 years ago, something like that. And probably, yeah, up until recently, like a couple of years ago, I would say, I did it from time to time as well with people that I might have like been dating a little bit, but then I didn't feel the connection, and I've done it, and I feel there's there's shame around this, because I don't want to be the person who ghosts. I want to be the person who's like good at communicating. And at some point, I really like did everything I could to stop this behavior, because I didn't see any reason anymore. I just saw it's so avoidant. There's really no reason for ghosting, not at all, never. I don't think there's ever a reason to ghost. You can always just end it with a simple text, and you decide how honest you want to be, and you decide how deep you want to go. No one expects you to tell them all the reasons why you are cutting the connection. You don't have to do that, but just something so that there's clarity. I think clarity is so important, and there's really, for me, there's no reason to ghost. And when I did, it was always avoiding conflict, because I have a tendency to want to be in harmony and not have this conflict between people, or make them think like I don't like them, which is basically what I show them when I ghost. But yeah, it feels like less real, right? When you do it, you're like kind of imagining a scenario where this is not so harmful, and just like pushing it away. So I'm not proud of it, but I've done it, and I don't think there's a good reason to do it at all. Never.
What did you do to work on it? That you said you
Um,
did things to work on it.
Yeah, I just realized how it made me feel. Like I didn't feel an integrity when I did this. It made me feel afterwards, I was like, fuck, this is not the man I want to be. This is not how I want to communicate. It feels really bad to treat other people like that. And it also feels bad to be treated like this as well. So, and then I realized I can just, like, I'm in control. This is not necessarily something bad or something painful, or more painful than the ghosting behavior. So probably like just really letting a grown-up perspective sink into the little child that is just avoiding conflict, and showing him, that little boy inside of me, like, there's nothing bad about this, and we are grown-ups, and you can just explain, and nobody forces you, like I said, to be like the level of honesty, like, or the level of depth, how to like why this happens. Nobody forces you to do anything there. You can just decide on your own. You're in full control. And then it made it much easier for me to do that. Yeah. And then, of course,
Also,
I made some experiences that were good, right? I communicated it, and they were like, okay, thank you for sharing that with me. It makes total sense. I understand.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think adding to that, you say there's no reason to ghost someone. If there was no reason, we wouldn't do it. So that little boy in you that was taking the wheel and said, no, I don't want to talk to that person, probably did it for a good reason. This is by no means like to gaslight you, but to be like, yes, he avoided the situation, but he avoided it in order to maybe maintain a feeling of safety. And the thing is, if you just stop ghosting people and you plunge into unsafety, you may want to find a better way of keeping you safe while retaining the contact. And I wonder in this context, is it just dating? Because I think everybody knows the situation where you have like 50 unread messages on WhatsApp, and some of these messages you don't reply sometimes for months, like unread voice notes and things like this. Like, is this ghosting or is it just what is that?
I'm like
What
that.
do you because I think like I've yet to I know a few people and they are very usually like very orderly and very like in tune with their conscience. And I personally don't like having these open loops. And that's also what I think ghosting creates. It's just you constantly live with this open loop lurking in the back of your head that is constantly like producing stress. You're thinking about it maybe more than you would admit to, and you maybe regret it more than you would admit to. And I have the same feeling with the open messages because they're literally open loops. It's like
Yeah.
WhatsApp is telling me, hey, Tim, these are messages you have to reply to. And if you don't, then they will just stay open forever. So, and personally, it creates some sort of helplessness or something like that in me that is coming from the thought of I should listen to these or reply to these messages. And also a part that is just like, no, not doing that. So
It's almost like the overwhelm of modern life technology and always being reachable.
yeah.
Like actually, I just had lunch with a colleague, and she even said that she was like, "Yeah, there's no escape. Like before, if you needed to have a conversation with someone or they're coming to you, like I have people on Instagram with projections coming at me sometimes. Like before, you'd have to like have an appointment or meet with someone face to face if you have a problem with them, and now someone can just like drop into your inbox and like go right in there into your time and space and energy. It's like because we're doing dating just on this episode, I think we like there's something more emotionally charged when the ghosting happens from that side of things that brings out more of this trauma response. But I think we could do a whole episode about ADHD, like, and all the concepts of like these open loops and like how intense that is, having them all there, and this pressure that we feel, the emotions, the guilt of like not replying, because it's just overwhelm modern society. Like we have too much information coming at us compared to what our brains can handle. Like we are but simple monkeys. we just
Yes.
we can have like a couple of channels at one time.
Yeah,
And
totally.
ghosting, yeah.
And
Go on.
I think there's a difference between the two, because one is I'm
Yeah.
ghosting, and there's never going to be anything more, like that's it. And the other thing is I'm not replying for a month, and then maybe they'll be angry, but then I'll text back, and then it creates different emotions, at least for me. And just quickly, what I want to share about that before coming back to the dating is, for me, I realized there's some sense of guilt there that somehow, like, everyone who's read Existential King knows what I'm saying now, is somehow pleasurable almost. It's like, oh yeah, I feel like I am guilty. Like deep inside, there's a belief like I am wrong, I am guilty. So like this feeling of, yeah, I didn't reply, and they might like with every day I'm not replying, they get more and more angry and agitated, and like, yeah, I'm guilty. I did something wrong. I didn't reply.
Woo!
Yeah, amazing. It's like a thrill. It's like it gives me the kick that I need in my life. Just like, reconfirming
Seeing
the
these
belief, the core
50
belief
messages.
that I am wrong.
Woo! Oh,
So, yeah.
70. It's almost 80 now.
And of course there's an aspect, there's so many messages and I need to focus. Like I need to focus on the things that I really want to do, and I can't every day like sit down and reply to 5-minute voice messages and keep the conversation going. Sometimes it just need a break.
Just reply with "talk to my assistant."
Yeah.
Or, please talk to the
What do
manager.
you
I don't have
reply
time for
when
this.
what do you reply when you're like, this conversation needs to end now because I'm not getting anything out of this anymore? And you
I
just be
block
like,
them.
just
Just block them, Jannick.
Yeah.
Best, easiest solution.
Error.
There's
Message not sent.
Usually what I do is like, this has been a great exchange. I'm looking forward to doing more of that when we see each other again, which will be in 3 months, in 5 months, in 6 months. And then you're like, out of it.
Oh, this reminds me of a back in the days we had ICQ. I think Jannick remembers it.
Of course.
And maybe it's like MSN. It's like a messenger from back in the days where you sit in front of your big ass computer and you like text people. At one time, I was really annoyed by a classmate. She would like text me constantly, and then I composed a message that said like something, you've been blocked by this user. Please text him again. And I just made sure it was like it was like as professional as it gets, and she just kept on texting me afterwards, so it didn't work. Because I don't even know if I could have blocked her technically, but I think I was just too,
Curious.
I was too afraid, too curious, or too afraid of actually doing it. I don't know. I was 13 and desperate.
I always love that we'd like spend all day with our classmates and then go home and sit at your computer and spend all evening messaging your classmates. It's giving away how old we are, guys.
Damn.
Okay. And we're still doing that.
Okay, so let's transition into the quiz part of this show. There's another like discussion point I want to bring in at the end, but it all kind of links in. I have to say, preparing for this episode was a ride because I used it as an opportunity to like look at my inventory of like people I've dated and like reflect on. And when I tell you that like every single girl definitely has a note in her notes app that's tracking all the people that she's dated, like to varying degrees. Some of my friends also put rankings or funny notes about them or things like this. So it was just interesting for me to like look through and be like, this many nationalities, these different kinds of jobs that people had. So, so it's a little bit like
that's interesting. I've never heard of that, and I wonder at the same time what the male version of this would be.
True.
Just a list of names. That's the male version.
Just the German way of doing it. Just a list of names, job.
If they remember the name, it could be like
salary.
Girl from English pub, like
blonde chick from the English
Ibiza
pub.
girl. I have to admit that was like 3. I forgot the names. I just remembered like where I knew them from. So, let's start with an open question first. I want you guys to have a rough guess at what my type is, because you both know me a little bit, like know some experience of people that I've dated. So I'm curious if you have any impulse. There's no wrong answer here as well. This is a free written.
Do you mean that your type or the men that you've been manifesting? Because these could be. I mean, I
love this.
I mean,
give me both. Give me both. Give me both.
No, I mean, first of all, that's a cool distinction actually, because if you have a type, that doesn't necessarily have to be with who you end up with. So the guys that you.
I'm ready for this. Like, I'm prepared to be roasted on this call.
So you actually attracted men into your lives that were financially incapable, that were slightly avoidant, that needed to be mothered in some way, shape, or form. And the relationships ended up with you being resentful and unhappy. And I would say your type is a very clean looking, good body, has to have a 6-pack and things like this, and also does have to smell good. It's not like you wouldn't date someone with like a lousy beard and things like this. It needs to be properly shaved and like slight gangster vibe to it, like someone that could protect you, which is interesting because the people that you're dating so far, like if someone threatens you with a knife, they would they would be like, take her, please, take her
Oh,
money.
I'm literally dating my dad always. This is a joke.
But what you look for is like, I would say like something like the opposite. So that's my shadowy feedback. But obviously, I know
Oh,
you're
how do I
quite
fix
wrong.
that, guys?
Wait,
How do I
first of all,
stop
like,
dating my
how's your dad?
dad?
What's your dad like? We need to know this.
He's a very sweet man, but he's not very strong in his masculine. He is not very good at managing money. He doesn't take initiative. He's also very skinny. Like I also date a lot of like skinny guys, which is ironic because I kind of am like a bit curvier, so it makes more sense that I would like also go for like a bigger guy or something like this. So yeah, it's everything you say. Like if I was getting robbed, I don't think he would like punch someone in the face. Like I think he'd be a bit like and then I'd be the one who'd be like, like
Yeah, you're doing the anchor work. But
yeah.
your dad is also he's really sweet and really kind and loving and like he loves making people laugh and things like this. And sometimes I'm like, oh, Ashley could really use someone that is funnier than her.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I'm in a relationship, so someone else has to. And Jannick
Uh,
also, yeah, like Jannick
Let's
just
do a little
confirmed.
yeah.
PSA, like public service announcement. We're gonna go find Ashley. I just guys, my main priority is I would like to find a European husband because of Brexit. I don't have like free travel around the Schengen agreement, so I would just like anybody with a European
But this
passport
is
who
what it is
matches
now.
Would
Tim's
do.
This is what it is
description.
now.
Anyone.
I see. I see.
Anybody.
This episode has become a public service now. Okay, I want to add something. Or like, I mean, Tim, probably you know her best. Like, probably everything you said was true and almost complete. But one thing I noticed was you asked Ashley, "How do I heal this?" And then we can bring in the topic of polarity, right? Because what might have happened when your dad was the way you described was like that you thought you need to now become the counterpart. Like you need all the things that he can do and that he doesn't represent in the masculine, you need to have them to balance that out and to feel safe. So now that's what you did, and now you have like you are a power woman. Like you can get shit done. You can also deal. You can make money and you can also spend money, and you know how to do
Okay.
both.
Why was that comment necessary, Jannick? You make money,
I
then
don't.
it's all gone.
It's my shadow. It's my shadow. But this episode is
I
not
love
about
it.
me. Um, and now you are attracting the things that you don't like, that you didn't that you don't represent for yourself, or that you don't have, right? So we are always attracting the opposite. So that's why, in order to like, and because you want to feel safe, and you gathered all this behavior and all these tendencies in order to feel safe, in order to like have everything that you needed to feel safe, and now you are really good at it. So now you're not necessarily attracting someone who is really good at this, because you are already really good at it. And because I think there's still a part in you that doesn't trust this to be in someone else. Like you want to do it your own. You want to have full control over that, because it's really, really scary, especially for a woman, but for anybody, to trust in somebody else having these things that you in childhood learned that one man that was closest to you, which was your father, didn't have. So it's like this part in you that's like, no, I don't trust it, and I won't feel
Yeah.
safe with that. So it's more even a danger. Like same thing when we analyzed your dream in, I think, the first episode, right? Was it the first or the second one?
Mm-hmm.
The second one. And yeah, and where this masculine energy was even dangerous. You're like, I want this, but there's a part of me that feels like that's dangerous and uncomfortable, because I didn't grow up with this kind of energy in my household as well. So it doesn't feel like home.
Yeah.
Deep. Jesus Christ. Where
This
did
was
that come from?
epic. Thank you, Yannick. That was like some free therapy right there. I mean,
Yeah.
I know this aspect, and there's a pandemic of like highly independent women right now. Like it's also the slight repercussions of the like different waves of feminism that have come through that also indoctrinated even myself in my late teens, early 20s, that like I didn't need a man and I was fine by myself. And then of course all of these patterns of the people that I would start dating came into my life. So it's very hard to undo, because indeed, like there's safety in the control, and letting go of that feels really, really scary when you've never had the lived experience of being held by the masculine.
Yeah.
So it's but I feel like I'm like in the last year as well, like having more and more experiences where men come into my field that actually have their shit together. And it's like showing me examples of healthy men that can communicate. And even if it's just friends that I have, like even both of you, like spending so much time with you also mirrors to me that it's possible that there are also men around that want to talk about their feelings and that are, yeah, open to doing relationships and things in a different way than just like not talking about what's going on or not going to therapy and all of these things. So it's like my therapist uses this phrase. She's like, you're just banking new experiences. Like, oh, it's possible that a man can be like this. Banked, banked, banked. So it's like shifting the reality.
Banked.
Banked. Cool. Okay. So finally a quiz.
That was your list.
We can have like some sound effects of that.
One more thing about that. Because
okay.
to me, it's like bringing these two things together in your experience, and like no perspective is a given or is objectively true. So the perspective of thinking, here's the emotionally available man, but he's soft and he doesn't have his shit together, and here is the man who is like has a healthy aggression and goes for the things he likes and is purposeful, but he can't talk about emotions and he can't be soft and open up and like really see me and feel me in everything that I am. And then there's this perspective, they don't go together. And the more like you have men in your life who actually represent both, and there's always a tendency, one is more than the other, but like both to a healthy degree or healthy level, and then you can choose, the more exactly you are banking these new experiences and collecting proof. But I always feel healing is both. One side is collecting new experiences and kind of like overwriting the old pattern, and the other one is really just seeing and loving and being there and expressing the part that in the first place came up with this perspective, right? Like Tim said, there's a good reason why this part of you came up with this perspective to keep you safe. So be sitting with that and at the same time gathering like new experiences. And then it comes like both sides. The one is like top down and the other one is bottom up, right? That's how you call it. Top down, bottom, like, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? Yeah.
sounds rude.
I would also say
I feel offended.
Blocked.
Blocked. Jannick has been kicked out of the Zoom.
I would also say this is a cool thing to reflect on in general with things that we want. Is what we want also what would be good for us? So the man that I want, or the woman that I want that has these and these and these qualities, to really sit back and like, if I look at myself from a meta perspective, or if I look at myself as someone that loves me, is this person that has these qualities really good for me? And also, if I find myself attracted to someone, then to ask, it might be thrilling, it might be super like a feeling of in loveness, but is being with that person actually good for me, or is it just a wish fulfillment that comes more from a need, a lack for something that wants to be compensated, or actually something that is elevating my life to a to a new level of trust, to a new level of safety, and creates a nice co-living experience, or shared life. So that's I find that really important. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for giving me some free therapy, guys. Okay, you get rewarded with some quiz questions now. Okay.
Yeah.
So this exercise is called Three Truths and a Lie. And some of these are stories about people that I may or may not have dated, and instances that could have happened. So I gave them all funny little titles as well. So Three Truths and a Lie. I guess you could also say never have I ever like XYZ. So I have I was trying to figure out how to word this a little bit. So number one, double life. I dated a drug dealer. Number two, Romeo and Juliet. I wrote my phone number onto a piece of paper, tied it to an apple, and threw it out the window to a hot skateboarder in the street below. Number three, the switch up. I arrived to a boat party with one date and I left to go home with another. And number 4, air miles. I flew to another state to meet someone who I only met online.
Romeo and Juliet, the apple. What was the first one?
I dated a drug dealer.
Okay, are we in competition with each other, or are we like figuring this out together?
I don't mind.
But let's figure this out together, because otherwise we need to keep our whole thought process to
Some of the
ourselves.
things I know because
Yeah.
I know Ashley.
I think it's
So I
one
would
or
just
two.
say you go first.
Okay, I think it's 1, but it might be 2.
Yeah, I also thought like 1 is the only thing I don't know about, but then again, where does a drug dealer start, and where does a guy with little money that has like 30 grams of weed at home and occasionally sells it to his hippie friends end?
Okay, I get that, but like,
so
what's your
I
answer?
would say it's number. What is the 4th one again?
The 4th one is air miles. Flew to another state to meet someone I'd met online.
Yeah,
she did that.
So it's number 1. Number 1.
So the joke's on you guys. They're all true.
No, that's not fair. That's not fair. That's not the joke's on us. The joke's on you.
I told you I'm gonna roast myself this episode. So
that's the power thing again. Like,
I overruled the 2 men.
It's like
I'm more powerful than the men in the podcast. Yes.
Yeah, no, I did date a proper drug dealer who I figured it out after like a few weeks of dating, that he kept having all these weird messages coming through, and that he had an apartment in Amsterdam that he didn't go to. And then he was like, yeah, there's maintenance happening there, so I stay somewhere else. And I was like, something's up. And then it came out that he has a weed farm in that apartment and things like this. So
a weed farm,
of course.
Yeah.
Well, of course.
So yeah, he's known as the drug dealer. But yeah, all of those are true, actually.
That's so dramatic. Your dating life is like a movie.
Yeah, I'm not finished. Okay, so the one that Tim knew was true, air miles, that indeed I flew to another state to meet someone that I'd just been talking to online. But bonus question then, how many times have I flown international to meet someone I met either online or just once?
I remember this one guy in London.
It's a multiple choice question.
Do you just have to give me a number? How many times have I flown international?
Okay, I count down to 1 and we say the number simultaneously.
I'll count down. 3, 2, 1.
3.
Tim is correct. So it's 3.
Yeah, of course. Let's go.
And bonus. How many of those turned out to be a bit psycho?
Oof.
All of them.
Yep.
No, just 2. Just 2.
How many of those did you block?
Just one of them. The one that Tim knows as well. Yeah.
Nice.
The other one is actually a friend of ours. Like, that was a very successful story. It's just for friends. Like, I didn't have to block that person. But the 2 of them, the London one and the American one, bit cray-cray.
Don't fly to the US, don't fly to London.
Cray-cray.
They have names like the London one. Who's that? He's the London one.
The London one.
Beware.
That's the one I threw the apple out the window to, the skateboarder.
I know that story. Yeah.
Yeah. That could have been very romantic. He was like, I kept the paper and we can frame it for our kids. And then I flew back a few weeks later to meet with him again. And he was horrible and so mean.
Future
and I was like,
we could have kids and frame it for our kids, and then we'll be happy forever, Ashley. And you're like, yay, okay.
No red flags at all.
No.
Okay, we've got two more quiz questions, and then we have one more topic to go through. Okay, I could only really think of ones where you're trying to find the odd one out. So sorry for it being a bit repetitive. Which profession have I not been with?
But this is real now, right? Don't fuck.
These are real. No, one of these is true. One of these I've not dated or been with. Number 1, pool lifeguard. Number 2, yeah, like a swimming pool lifeguard. Swimming lifeguard. Cool lifeguard.
Amazing artist.
Number two, one of my exam invigilators, like the people who walk around when you're taking an exam, when you're an abitur. Number
An
three,
Abitur.
my surf teacher. Number four, my city tour guide. Number five, teacher at a retreat. And number six, a men's work coach.
So who you have not been with? What's the
What job have I not been with?
tour guide? That's my
Jannick?
answer.
I'll go for number one.
The lifeguard. Funny.
Yeah.
You're both wrong. I've
Damn
actually
it.
never been with a men's work coach.
No, you tricked us
Hilarious.
Look
again.
at
You
you.
tricked us
Look at
again.
you. That says a lot about you. First, shitting on the man with your little wrong
No, I
playing
know
games.
for a fact that's wrong. But I'm not gonna use any names. I can write the name in the chat.
Send it in the chat. I want to see. Nothing happened with that person. I didn't even kiss that person.
Jannick, shame on you.
Jannick, I did not even kiss that person.
Ooh.
That's a no.
Okay. But he's
That's
a
a
men's
no.
work. He does men's work.
Yeah, but that was a whole projection crush towards me. Like, doesn't mean that I count that at all. So,
Okay. All right.
yeah. Okay, but I want to talk about the men's coach aspect, but I do have one last bonus question if you want to see the ultimate winner of this round. Because I think at the moment Tim is leading.
Yeah.
With
he
one
is.
1-0. Okay. This
1-0. With 1 million
how
points.
many nationalities are on that list?
What?
How many nationalities are on my list?
Mhm.
On your list, on your dating list.
Mhm.
And of course, like there can be duplicates. Like I lived in Holland for 7 years, so probably Dutch is going to be on there, but like just singular nationalities.
Yeah. Obviously.
I have a number. I
Me
just
too.
downloaded a number.
Yeah. Same.
Maybe both write it in the chat if you want to, and then
Or
Okay.
3-2-1. 3-2-1
Yeah.
situation.
3-2-1. Yeah.
okay. 3, 2, 1.
9.
8. Ooh.
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 Don't know how I feel about telling you the number.
It's 17, right?
20 as of
20.
yesterday.
Yes.
20.
Yeah, I'm a woman of the world, guys. Come on.
Yeah, she's traveling so much. And it means that it's 1-1 now. And I got a point.
It is. It is. So actually you both drew. Well done on the crash course disaster road of Ashley's dating life. But I wanted to talk about the men's coach thing actually, because and this is the discussion aspect.
The laughter. Congrats for my shitty dating life, Roach. Yay.
Hey, I'm British. We can roast ourselves. I don't mind this. I love roasts. No, so I wanted to talk a bit about. I last week had a chat with somebody, and they were saying that it's super refreshing. They're dating someone now who doesn't do men's work, doesn't do any of like the healing work, and that's actually for her a red flag is when a man does men's work. I think because of previous experiences of them like being super in the spiritual, all in the concepts and the tantra, the spiritual fuckboys kind of thing, and that like it's very rare to encounter people who are healthy. That's her story, but I also understand that like there's very less men compared to women in this community, and it also got me thinking then like actually is that true where it could actually be very refreshing to date somebody that isn't in all of this world, but at some point does that also cause misalignment because there's so many things you just can't talk about? So yeah and I know both your partners are in this world, so it's a bit like a skewed question, but yeah,
very biased.
Good question. So to me, to me, like this whole spirituality, conscious, relating, whatever thing wouldn't be important per se. What's important to me is the values behind that. So communicating openly, like an interest in life, and like a willingness to make the most out of life, an interest in like a person that is more open to experience in terms of the big 5 personalities, like that is maybe interested in art, that is adventurous, things like this, and that I can just experience cool stuff together. I find myself lately, though, in friendships, not in dating life, inclined to hang out, or like I'm interested in hanging out with people that are not in that circle, because I feel like that's it gets, to me, it can get a bit like an echo chamber, just hanging out with people that are in the consciousness scene, whatever you want to call it. And I find it very refreshing to meet musicians, to meet artists, and people that just do other stuff that I also find interesting. But that doesn't necessarily translate to my dating life. It's very beneficial to me, actually, to be with someone that, that just understands what projection is, understands the shadow, that knows how to communicate in a way that is not creating resentment, but actually healthy conflict resolution, that knows about healthy sexuality, like all of these things. I would find almost a deal breaker, like, because they first have to be established, or compromises need to be made. So that's what I can say on that.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. And I still know this kind of aspect of you look at the men in this space, and a lot of them might not embody what they preach. And I think it's because there is a reason why they're in the space, and there's a reason why this topic is so important to them. Because it's so interesting, because maybe there's such a big lack, or such a big, like, uh, part of them that wants and needs healing, and they realized that, and so they went really, really deep into this work. And what can happen sometimes is that you think you're going to become somebody else by healing. And I don't like this perspective. I like to go with the perspective, you kind of, yeah, of course you'd always change, but at the same time you are who you are, and you have the wounds that you have, and they make you the person that you are. And then through the healing you become really good at, like, shining in your strength, and you become really good at dealing and managing the weaknesses that come from this, like, if you want to call it trauma, or maybe you just want to call it, like, imprints, right? The imprints that you got. And sometimes they confuse that, and they think they're going to become this different person, and they've become really good at also presenting everybody else that they've become this different person, but deep inside they still have the same kind of imprints. And once you neglect that, and you start to believe yourself, and also make others believe that that's not the case anymore, then there's a big weird gap happening between how the woman might perceive you, and what she might expect from you, and who you actually are. And then it becomes an issue. So you stop owning your darkness, your shadows, or whatever, because you've become so good at rationalizing all of that. And that's where the issue lies, not necessarily in, is the man in the same space, or in the same healing space, or not. Because I can say from my own relationship that I love that we are both in this together. And especially, like, when it comes to other interests, like music or sports or whatever, it's totally fine. Maybe I want to do triathlon, and she doesn't even know, like, the order in which this sport happens, and that's, like, totally
Right.
fine, no problem. But this space, like this healing space, has so much to do with the way we are behaving in relationships, what we
Yes.
know about relationships, how we connect with each other, like Tim said, all these things that Tim said. And that's why I believe it's really good to know about this.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's so healthy for us. The way we communicate is, it's just, yeah, amazing. And I love that. And I never want to exchange that.
That's what you say is actually part of the reason why I stopped looking into, David Data and like all of these. I mean, this is great stuff, but at some point I felt like there was an underlying wish for me to be someone else. Like I wanted to be more manly. I wanted to be a more integrated man. And I mean, everything we talk about, we call them like the man's workers. That's like an overgeneralization, of course, just to make that clear for the people who are listening. It's obviously not everyone, but like I felt a threat in myself to be like, if I indulge in this work, I will put on a mask of someone that did the work, someone that has integrated his masculinity. I was like, this is not the way. Like there's no, I don't want to be someone else that I really am. And then I committed to just like Jannick said, own whoever I was. And that's ironically when I started to pull in relationships that were more healthy to me, or that led to the relationship I have now, to see, I'm not going to change for anyone. I don't need to be more manly. I don't need to be more masculine. I don't need to be more feminine. I don't need to own the polarities more. I don't need to provide more. It's just following whatever is coming up with me. That's everything that's needed, really.
Yeah.
Like stop. That's what a good friend Finn of like, we all know him. He's a great guy, and what he always said, the feeling of I need to change someone in order to be liked, or I need to be complete in order to be in a relationship, is the wrong way of thinking about it. You want to find someone that loves you in spite of everything that you think is flawed about you. And that starts with, obviously, with you having some sense of I'm okay the way I am-ness, and imagine then encountering someone that is even like, yeah, I don't care if you're avoidant sometimes, or I don't care if you're like anxiously attached. I just love you the way you are. There's nothing, literally nothing you need to change about yourself. Just the way you are, you're okay. And that's, to me, the most sacred and healing experience, because it heals the core wound that almost every person has, that in some way, shape, or form, some aspect of their personality is wrong and needs to be suppressed and needs to be masked with an integrated masculinity, or like a sacred femininity, or how whatever label you prefer over your perceived flaws and your perceived faults.
Yes.
I have two things to say to this. First of all, Jannick, swim, bike, run.
Good one.
Well,
And
wife material.
Yep.
and second of all, what I found with my main past relationship, there was an element like we were both really into all of those concepts and terms and like reading all of these things, and it was almost kind of nice because we bonded over it together, of like this a collective direction the couple was taking of learning of new things and sharing information, and like so sometimes it wasn't always about like needing to be changed, but like also that like collective evolution was, at least for me, because I'm super nerdy about this kind of stuff. Like my previous partner, we were just super into the MBTI, like Myers-Briggs. Like it was like a secret code language. My roommates would be like, "What are you on about?" And we're like, "Yeah, that person's TE is like really in the unconscious and their FI in this," and that people are like, "What?" So it's almost like if you have like a shared interest, then it's like can still unify you a bit, even if it is these like topics of maybe more esoteric feminine masculine aspects. Completely missed that for the whole of this episode. Like I was 2 years also in a polyamorous relationship, but that's maybe for another episode, because there's a lot of topics there, which is very big in the spiritual world. Monogamy, open relationships, all of those things.
Yes.
So
That's a big one.
yeah, juicy one for another
But
episode.
what about the other aspect of finding some arguments why it might be good to have like differences that balance each other out? Maybe it's not in the term like maybe it's not a healthy balance to have like one person being really into conscious communication and boundary setting and all of that, and the other person is like, I'm not into this at all, like I don't care about this, then we can balance each other out. I don't think it works in that area. But what could be some areas where actually, yeah, it can be helpful to not have the same interests, or even this personality structure? You might know a lot about this, Ashley, since when you were so familiar with Myers-Briggs. In the terms of the personality structure, where are some points where it's good to be different so that you can balance each other? Because I think what we were just talking about,
opposites attract.
but the things we were just talking about, I think they are some common ground that like when you both do it, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful foundation for you to come together, and not something where you should have polarity.
It's what I love is like a lot of the compatible types of Myers-Briggs are like very different. Like I often attract in a lot of INFPs, which are like intuitive feeling men who are very floaty and in their feelings. And it's interesting because with that type, which most of my partners have been that type, their strength is my weakest function and their weakest function is my strength. So the TE and FI, so like the really efficiency aspect of like just being able to order things and be structured and create the very masculine traits, and then the introverted feeling, which is about your own how you judge the world based off your own feelings, and it's all happening inside, and you're making all your decisions based off of how you feel, not so much about what the rest of what a group feels, more internal. So for me, it was always very expansive to have those relationships, because just by watching that person do life, they showed me a different way of doing things. And then it was like, I got to be more feeling and in my feminine, and they got to get their shit together a bit more. So it's also a bit
Mm.
hard when I'm then trying to be the like receptive feminine in a relationship, because like my personality trait is instinctually so flowy in that executive doing as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But not impossible.
It's possible. And one aspect I want to bring in is sometimes when I'm already intuitive and like emotional person, and then you could think, oh yeah, for the polarity it needs somebody who is on the other side, and then we balance each other out. But sometimes in my experience, it's the opposite. It's like I meet someone who's even more intuitive and even more connected to the emotions, and then all of a sudden that brings out my more like the other aspects of being like more in my rational, and be like, okay, she takes over that part even more than me, or it's just like softens even more than I am soft, and then it kind of like encourages me to go into more of this masculine, because I already feel, yeah, it makes me feel already more masculine, and then I'm encouraged to go there even more. So I feel like, yeah, there's also that aspect to it. And one thing that I want to bring in as well is in terms of emotions, right? There could be people where the dominant emotion might be sadness or melancholy, and then other people, they are more like angry and joyful people. And I would be interested on your take on this, like the basic emotional states, because I dated some women in the past where they were not at all on the same level of basic emotional state as me, and it was beautiful. Like I saw them, it was like, wow, it's so inspiring, they're so like joyful, or they can get angry really easily, it's so inspiring. And in the beginning there was so much beauty in that, and after a while I noticed, fuck, this is so hard. Like whenever I get a little sad, she feels super threatened by that and thinks the world's gonna end because she's so afraid of her own sadness. And whenever she's too much in her joy and her anger, I'm like, fuck, I need to be more joyful, I need to be more like connected to my anger, otherwise I'm not on her level, I can't reach her there, we can't be there together. And then that created some dissonance.
Yeah, to me, it's in my current relationship, it's like what you said about temperament also applies, that I tend to be very, very calm, grounded, and centered in this connection. And my partner is, very fluffy, light, and almost like a butterfly that is, swirling around me, and is, she's very, very lively. And I feel like I naturally, like, even though I'm not really choosing this, I naturally become like a counterpoint of clarity and calmness to that. And that is what automatically creates this polarity. And I don't I don't understand polarity really. Like I don't know what's going on. And I also sometimes question like the term being, like, everybody shakes hand when people say he's in his masculine and she's in her feminine, but what the fuck are people talking about, like, really? And I could like also play the game because I have an idea of what masculinity means, but if I'm honest with myself, I I would not be so sure about that. Like, what is masculinity? What is masculine behavior? Why can't a woman um, show this behavior as well? And would that make her less feminine? Or, there's like, it's a bit black and white to me. And but also, yeah, I have a hard time describing these qualities in general. Like, I don't know what they point towards.
I wanted to also touch on, because Jannick was saying something before about the intuitive aspect. And with the Myers-Briggs, you're either intuitive or sensing. And so intuitives are most of our friends, most people who are like, I don't think we had a single sensor in emotional releases when we worked there. It was really everyone who's connected to seeing patterns and the wider picture of more esoteric thinking. So I noticed that like I've dated one sensor, I think, one S, because the clash of life is just so different there, because they're really living in the moment. They're really wanting to be in their senses, and they're people who have shared hobbies and they're like want to together and do these things. They don't want to talk about ideas. And for me, that's like very hard to find a mutual connection for romance, because you need that similarity in that aspect. Like for me,
Yeah.
the N, you need that aspect to be able to like talk. And we're all the ones who probably want to talk about astrology and things. And the S's are the people who work in like corporate jobs and finances and HR and like happily to walk their dog and just like watch movies, or like they're way more just like in the experience and less in their intuition.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that bit in as well.
Yeah, I think the whole topic of personalities, because there's many different personality models, would be a great thing to explore in a future episode, because there's also like I have a few controversial takes on that topic. And I would say, like, for this episode, we can just wrap it up. And we hope you had fun exploring the shadows of Ashley's dating world and maybe finding yourself in these shadows. And we hope that whatever we shared with you was of value and that you had just as much fun than we had. And we hope to see you next week in another episode of The Spiritual
Bypassers podcast. And also don't forget to subscribe and comment. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Send this to a friend or send this to a family member, whoever you think might benefit from this. Maybe somebody else you know had a crazy
Or
dating
some
life.
hot eligible men.
Or some hot men for Ashley. We see you next time. Bye bye.